To take on our first presentation, we have Dr. David Jeb Nyomo. He is a GIS and cartography expert. He holds a Ph.D. in geography with specialization in hydrology and water resources, fluvial, geomorphology, and remote sensing. He currently is the managing director of GeoApps Plus Limited, the commercial department of the National Space Research and Development Agency in Abuja, Nigeria. Doc, you're welcome, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Samuel. I'm very, very glad and honored to be a speaker at this year's GeoApps conference organized by Sambus Geospatial. And I'm also highly delighted and privileged to be one of the speakers among others who are here this afternoon. I'm really happy to be here, and I want to say that for all this while, we have interacted with Sambus Geospatial, and it has been a very, very wonderful moment. And I want to thank you all for your assistance in the things that we do. I think I can go straight to my presentation.
Yes, yes, you can.
Okay, please, I have already asked that it should be projected on the other side so that I can go through it.
All right, yes. Precious.
I'm actually going to speak on how geospatial technology has been used in one of the most devastating hazard or environmental hazard that affects humans, and that is flooding. Like I have been rightly introduced, I'm a hydrologist and a fluvial geomorphologist. My present work at the agency is to commercialize products and services developed by the agency. And apart from providing consultancy in various aspects, we also conduct training. But I have chosen to look at this very critical environmental phenomenon that affects millions of people worldwide. However, I have limited my presentation to just a few examples as regards to what happens in the country. So I have just about 3 case studies that I would like to mention as what we have done, or what I have done, as to showcase the use of geospatial technology, particularly in the work that we do. I don't know whether the presentation has been okay. So please, can you just move along, because I have limited time. So I'm going to just talk to the presentation, and I just want to look at in this area of phenomenon called flooding. And we already know what a flood is and what flooding is. However, there are different types of floods, and there could be those that come slowly, those that are rapid, and those that are like flash floods, like those ones that occur in the cities. And then we have floods according to location, like coastal floods, aerial floods, river floods, and urban floods. Please, so I will move fast. Now, most floods are caused by climatic reasons or factors, okay? And of course, they are mostly as a result of precipitation. But you could have other known climatic causes like earthquakes and volcanoes or landslides that can actually dam flowing rivers and cause flooding. Then, of course, in environments where there is poor waste disposal, sometimes most of these waste can actually block flowing rivers. So, and they can lead to flooding. And above all, the major problem that is encountered over the years based on observation is the fact that it is humans that have encroached marginal floodplains. Without the knowledge of past floods, we often assume that a low-lying area is free and may not be affected. But of course, if we look at past data, we may likely find out that such an area might have been influenced or might have been affected by floods over the years. So people that are not born maybe 100 years ago may not know that our environment is prone to flooding. Okay, so, and these are all factors that are considered even when modeling floods. All right, so let's go to the next slide. So this is just a screenshot to show causes of floods, and you can see these are things that happen from different sources. But like I said, if there is no running water, or snowfall, or ice sheet falling anywhere, there may not likely be any flood. But you can also have dam collapse or dam breaks, and dam breaks can also lead to flooding, and they can be very devastating. Those are the ones that are spontaneous. People don't know what has happened, and the area is already flooded. Next slide, please. Now, I have tried not to go into historical details as to what has happened maybe of recent or so. But generally, flooding is considered as the most deadliest and costliest of all global hazards, amounting to more than $215 billion losses yearly. And it is said to account for about 31% of the economic losses resulting from natural catastrophes and has caused enormous damage to lives and properties. It can affect either an individual, a community, or a whole country, like what happened in 2012 in Nigeria. And then the consequences of floods, both negative and positive, very greatly depending on the location and extent of the floods. And like I had said earlier on, sometimes if there is no trend analysis, it will not reveal any major flood that has occurred in the past, unless you have people that are alive to say, oh, 60 years ago, there was flood in this area. However, let's go to the next slide, because it is not as if floods are all, as if floods don't have benefits, okay? Floods do have benefits, although I have not mentioned that here, but we know that most riverine areas or coastal areas are self-preserving and also self-ameliorating, because flood waters come not only with the water, but with a lot of nutrients to nourish the environment. That is why you see, we often see that most floodplains are rich in nutrients and can support certain type of vegetation or agricultural activities, all right? However, because we are looking at the negative impacts, and that's why we are talking about it. But why do we have to model floods? Now, in understanding floods particularly, the first major step is the modeling. If we have long-term data, then it is possible to say, okay, look, let's see what will happen in this area, assuming we don't have any information, or if the area does not seem to show any sign of flooding. Now, hydraulic computer model involves the use of computer software to solve advanced mathematical equations based on a variety of parameters to provide an estimate on water levels, flows, and velocities along a river system. And during any flood modeling exercise, baseline information on the dimensions of the river channel and floodplain is gathered as part of the topographical surveys. A hydrological assessment is then carried out to assess the flows in the river channel. The issue here is that the first major step to understand flooding, particularly if we are actually trying to mitigate flood, then is to actually model the flood itself, gather the necessary data, use computer software, and that is where the GIS modeling comes in. Because when you put all this data together, today it becomes much more easier to integrate your data using a GIS software or a GIS system. And then with that, we can now see what can really happen in the area and then come up with solutions. This next slide. Now, flood depth is considered as the most important indicator of the intensity of flood hazard. And from these flood risk maps are prepared depending on the estimated depth of inundation. The estimation is commonly derived from various hydrological parameters and remotely sensed data. A flood risk map is a special thematic map that represents the characteristics of a hypothetical flood graphically from a synthesis of past flood events. So if we have long-time data, for example, long-time hydrometeorological data, that is either rainfall data, river stage, or river flow, we can actually come up with a hypothetical representation of what flood will look like in the area. So with sufficient long-term and accurate records, flood extents drawn from the empirical results become very powerful prediction tools because the flood risk map is often a map of more than one flood event. And that is why extreme statistical value are used for flood risk analysis. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Now, when we say why flood models, then here, this is where we see the role of GIS in flood models. So I titled this as GIS and flood models because GIS offer the following capabilities. When we talk about real-time hydrological models that are used for flood nowcasting and hazard mitigation, it means that we must have prepared the necessary information. We must have prepared the necessary data to impute whatever flood data. I mean, let's say there is rain falling now, and people downstream need to know what will likely happen. So if we have a flood forecasting system, it means as river stage rises, this information is imputed in real time, and we can see what is happening to the river. Downstream, people can be advised. Upstream, people can also be advised as to what is likely going to happen. And that actually takes us to flood forecasting and risk analysis. Then the web-based hydrological modeling system permits integrated handling of real-time rainfall data from a wireless monitoring network. Then GIS also offers the capability for artificial neural networks for prediction or multi-criteria evaluation to show where and what will happen, or using ranking system to develop a procedure for flood vulnerability, particularly as regards the proximity of people, facilities, or what we will call elements at risk to flooding. And then it also enables one-dimensional or two-dimensional flood routing. Then also, GIS also offers the capability for levees or dam breach modeling, and especially in those areas where there is likelihood of earthquakes, earth tremors, or volcanicities, or even when you have extreme unpredictable rainfall values from time to time, then it becomes very necessary to predict what may likely happen if a dam breaches. Then, of course, GIS also offers the capabilities for flood forecasting and then the rainfall runoff modeling. And in this case, especially in our own context in Nigeria, where every year we have predictions of either rainfall amounts or rainfall in various parts of the country and the likely floods, one basic question to ask is that if we have a certain amount of rainfall that will fall today, the question that we may ask is, how much of this rain is going to run off? And of course, there are many, many antecedent moisture conditions that are going to be considered for this. And GIS actually offers the capability. So it is not just the amount of rainfall, because we do know that even when we have high intensity rainfall, it may not lead to flooding. But at the same time, high intensity rainfall upstream may lead to flooding downstream in a different environment. So, and these are critical issues that GIS offers the capabilities to sort or to solve. Next slide, please. Then, in particularly for flood forecasting, because in many parts of the world today, flood forecasting has become a very, very important measure to forestall, even though every day we keep seeing the flooding occurring in most of these places that even have systems for flood forecasting. But that notwithstanding, at least there is always a warning system that tells people that, look, if this rain falls, it is going to lead to this amount of flooding. And so people can actually begin to move. But you know, with human nature, people don't often move unless they see the events occur. So GIS offers this capability of using long-term hydrometeorological data for forecasting and warning system for flooding. And with this, it is important to know that the flood forecasting model software must always be linked to an observation network and operating in real time. And the last point here is very important because when it comes to flood forecasting, and especially when we're talking about mitigation to flooding, if we can actually have the network, and that is one of the things that is lacking, the data or the weather stations that are actually wireless or that are actually in a network that can be linked together to enable us forecast the flooding. It becomes a very, very dicey issue in a country like ours. And this has been promoted, and we believe that if we have the necessary observation networks that operate in real time, it will be much more easier to forecast flooding. It could be raining on this part of the country or this part of the city where I live, and it may not be raining elsewhere, but we may be on the same drainage network. So, and this is very important. So these are some of the capabilities that GIS offers, especially for hydrological modeling as regards to flood forecasting. Please, next slide. Then I have mentioned the issue of using long-term hydrological models for flood forecasting and also for flood inundation analysis. In the literature, and it is not just what I've written here, even though I just mentioned the Hansen technique, the Gombis technique, the Spearman statistical technique, the log person type 2 and type 3 techniques, and some others that I did not mention here, because there is a lot in the literature. All of them have their unique applications. And particularly in countries where you don't have, we have many channels, even here in Abuja, that is there, you have many ungauged channels. And so if you have an ungauged channel system, you need a statistical method with haphazard data. You can still come up with something that is realistic, that is representative. And that is why all these techniques are available. And in most cases, especially in our own country, the Gombis statistical technique for extreme value statistical analysis, especially for flood inundation, takes care of inadequate data or where you have data gaps. It can cover for those things because it is often the highest value either of a month, of a day, or of a year that is used. Although it has its own lapses, but then it covers for where you don't have gauge channels that have consistent data. So all these are actually used for return periods for the maximum probable floods. And what this means is that every flood event or every hydrological or meteorological event like rainfall of high extremes have return or recurrent periods or return periods for which such an event could occur. And that is why often at times we hear communities say that, oh, the last time we saw this magnitude of rainfall was 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 10 years ago. So, and that actually relates to either a return period, okay, or a recurrent period, as the case may be. And that is what most of these statistical techniques enable us to do. And with this, it means that we can actually say that in years to come, or if we have an extreme value analysis or a return period, that return period means that any rainfall event that reaches that amount could lead to flooding. And it could be today, it could be tomorrow, or it could be in the next 100 years. So, and they are calculated based on a 5-year, 10-year, 100-year, or 200-year events. And it means that we are looking at something, looking at the past for the future. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. Hello, are you there? So please, let's go to the next slide. I think I've mentioned most of this, so I would not like to go to. Now, for hydrological modeling, one of the major data sets that is required, both for hydrologic and because they are not the same, the hydrologic models and the hydrological models. I don't want to go into most of these technical issues, but the most important thing is that for the type of data that is required for input in GIS for hydrological modeling, especially for flooding, is digital elevation model, land use, and soil type, okay? Then precipitation amount and intensity. And when we talk about precipitation amount, we're talking about either the rainfall, snowfall, depending on the environment, or ice sheet foam. Then, of course, we have the river flow, whether the river stage or the river flow itself. That is, we're talking about now flow in the river. Stage is the height of the water, okay, from the base level. So, and then, of course, the statistical data, like we have mentioned, maybe reservoir storage capacity or dam height, depending on what we are looking at. If we are looking at dam breach in this case, especially for a 2D hydrological modeling or a 1D hydrological modeling, then we may be looking at size of reservoir storage capacity, and the height of the dam. Okay, so then of course, the stream flow itself. So these are basic data that are required particularly for hydrological modeling. Now, although I didn't put one very critical data set, which is land use or land cover will take care of elements at risk. But I'm sure somebody will ask, what about the population? So yes, and that is a very critical data itself when it comes to risk analysis, because we are dealing with humans now. And then land use, land cover will give us information on infrastructure and others. So that could be extracted. So one major data set also that is required is the population data, because population at risk is always very important. So having said all this, I just want to show some few examples of hydrological modeling and flood risk analysis that has been done. And the first one is using multi-temporal satellite data to predict or to actually delineate flood hazards. In the first image, we see normal flood, where normal flow of a river, where there is no flooding. Now, the second image shows moderate flooding, okay? And the third image, as you can see by the right-hand side, which is image number 3, is where you have high flood. So you can see the extent to which the area is flooded. Now, what I've not shown here, of course, is the extraction of this information. Now, it means that we can use multi-temporal. If you don't have data, like we don't have rainfall data, we don't have population data, we can extract that type of data and show. Then, even though this map that we are seeing is not that of flood, I just brought it in to show changes in Lake Chad area from 1963 up to 2000. Between 2000 and now, the water in Lake Chad has either up and down. That is, sometimes it increases, sometimes it reduces, depending on what amount of water is coming from the Chari River from Cameroon Republic. Because if you understand these images, you will see that there isn't much water again coming from the side from Nigeria. even though the image is not showing us the river that is coming from Chari River, Cameroon Republic. But then that is the major source of water now. And that is why you see the image below shows the chart on the other extreme end of the southeastern part of it. And that is where the chart is now. If we will place the map of, well, the maps are there. You see that Lake Chad is no longer in Nigeria or even Niger Republic again. It is just at the border between Cameroon and Chad Republic. So most of the Lake Chad now is in Chad Republic. But prior to this, of course, there used to be flooding by the side of Lake Chad. Please, can we go to the next slide, because my time is almost going. Now, this is an example of floodation in Kaduna metropolis. Now, this was just an inundation study. So I don't want to go through the objectives. For those who may have this, you can actually look at it, but there were objectives that were used for this study. Please go to the next slide, because it will just show us a demonstration of how GIS was used to get the extent of floods, and using statistical measures like the return periods, we could see the extent of flooding in different return periods in Kaduna metropolis, using a 5-year to a 50-year return period. And the statistical information is there. Please, can we go to the next slide? But in this study, both digital elevation model, river stage, those were the two major data sets that were used. Then the other one is flood vulnerability and risk assessment of the Benue Trough. And at the Benue Trough, every year, thousands of people are affected. That is that's the settlements by the river, the section of the river from Benue River and the Niger River where they meet. But people don't realize that there are communities, those forested areas that we see, there are communities. And there are communities by the Murtala Bridge there. And every year they are affected by flooding. And but most of these, over the years, the only remedial responses to such area has been just relief and rehabilitation. There hasn't been significant effort for finding out how have the communities in this area been managing or coping with the flood in that area. So, but the study just aimed to show what has happened. Please, maybe we'll go to the next slide, because I know my time is almost fast spent. So this is just, on one side is the satellite image, and on one side is digital elevation model of this. And then using the information of past floods, we're able to generate flood scenario for the area. Please, can we go to the next slide? Okay, this is Nigerian Sat1 satellite image. And this is the same image in 3D before the flood. Okay, and this is after the flood. This is just a simulation of using the flood marks in the Benue Trough, because there are no flood records in the area, but there are flood marks that were used, particularly after the 2012 flood event. So using those flood marks, we are able to use the flood marks that on the walls of buildings in communities. After the flood, the marks were left there. So using extrapolation based on the datum in the area and those flood marks and the relief of the area, we could come out to how much was the level of flood. So if you apply GIS, it will show you the extent of inundation. And then with that, we could find out what are the areas that were affected, the estimated losses in terms of kilometer square, meter square, or hectare, and the percentage of the areas that were affected. And please go to the next slide. We show most of the communities in the areas that were affected. Most of the basic data is not here, but then this is just a demonstration of how GIS has been used in this area. Please, can we go to the next slide? Next slide, please. Then this is a workflow flood risk analysis. You know, the two types of studies were carried out in Kaduna. One was actually inundation analysis, and it's different from the risk analysis itself, because in the risk analysis, it means that there is a consideration of elements at risk like industries, agriculture, cements, bridges, and the rest of that put together, then using also the probable maximum statistical analysis, adding this together to come up with 5-year return periods, 10-year return periods, and a 100-year return period to show the extent of flows. And the flow ranking was also used to show areas of low risk, moderate risk, and high risk. Even though the image here may not be appreciated as the case may be, because unless we cut small sections and then zoom in and overlay, that you can actually see. But the information is there, is on the GIS. All this has been done to show for all the areas. And because it's just a demonstration, most of the communities were highlighted, and the extent of those communities were extracted within a corridor of 500 meters on both sides of river. So, and with this, we were able to find most of the areas that were at risk: high risk, low risk, and moderate risk. And in terms of moderate, we are not saying no risk, moderate risk. That means there was still risk, even within a 500-meter corridor from the river. So, and all this is just a demonstration of how GIS technology has been used for flow risk analysis. And this is just information on all of this in a 5-year return period to a 100-year return period. And go to the next slide. So these are communities along River Kaduna, and they are actually major communities. Go back to the other slide so that we can quickly. So, but that is the information on how much of the areas in each community that is affected by flood. And to some extent, the information may look small, but they are very, very significant as regards the infrastructure or agriculture, as the case may be, in different return periods in the area. So, well, there is no time to explain this return period issue. Maybe perhaps in question and answer session, maybe if there is need to highlight or explain in detail what that means. Can we go to the next slide? Now, having said all this, I just want to say that in conducting most of this our study, using GIS technology, particularly for flow risk analysis in the country, one of the major problems generally, and this is a general problem even in the use of GIS itself, is often the initial high cost of setting up a GIS system. Everybody knows this one. But even at the individual level, because first, it's either you need a computer. If you don't have one, you have to hire one. You have to hire GPS, and you're spending money. So putting these things together is where the initial cost lies. Okay, but if we are talking about maybe an organization, a state, or so, yes, of course, that is often one of the major issues. And then, of course, high cost of enterprise GIS software, because you see, one of the major problems that many people don't realize is that, of course, there are many open source software in the online, but they have their limitation, especially as regards the amount of data that they can take and the size of the data. Like the Kaduna data, I did that project. The initial data set that I had was about 1.9 gigabyte. Now, anytime you run an analysis, you will still generate that same amount of information. So if you are running 1-year return period, 2-year return period, and besides that one, there is ranking that is being done using the ranking procedure. So you are generating maps that are going to be input maps. You keep seeing that by the time I finished the analysis, I already had 49 gigabytes. Okay, so these are critical issues that open source software, most of these open source software may not be able to handle the analysis that we conduct. And especially if you are doing a state-wise analysis, okay? These are critical issues. So then we have polytrain user community when it comes to this. Apart from the fact that one may be trained individually, but you know, you go to the field, you need to work with people, and people must understand what you're doing. That's on one hand. I am involved in training, and I do know that one of the critical issues in GIS implementation itself is the user community. So, and it's one issue itself that we need to really work on. Then we have low level of programming capabilities among GIS users. And the reason is because when we talk about speeding up processes, yeah, you know, there are a lot of processes that we keep coming back to run them manually, even though we say they are digital. You know, we can all set up these systems and say, okay, look, I have a system I've set up. If I come, I can just input this data and it flows. Okay, then availability of the relevant input data. I've mentioned the issue of using Google statistical analysis, especially when you have data gaps. And it's one critical problem we have in the country. I'm a fluvial hydrologist, and you keep looking for data. Runoff, you can get. Rainfall, you can get. We have to rely on rainfall data from online sources. And most of these data sets, though they have not been calibrated, you know, but then we have, sometimes you don't have options. We have to rely on what has been done in other places as justification of what we are doing. So, and that means that there is actually need for either authorities that are responsible for data to make them available, or we have additional stations that we can generate these data sets. So, and it's one critical data, whether we are talking about remote sensing data or physical data from stations. I'm talking about meteorological stations in this case. Then fewer industry players. Now, I haven't said most of the other issues is because when you talk about GIS, those of us that work in government, there are many government organizations, of course, that are involved in this, but there are fewer industry players when it comes to the application of this technology in the country, because we still keep going back to government. And then poor perception by policymakers, and it's one of the major problem. Even at the organizational level, I'm not talking about my own organization because I'm in the space agency, but we have had issues trying to convince, you know, because, and that's actually my work, we have issues trying to convince most managers of either parastatals and other institutions on implementation of GIS in the work they do. Because there is nothing that you are doing today that does not have, that is not actually GIS based. I'm a geographer, you know, and anything you do is related to a location on the Earth's surface. So, and that is GIS for you. Then there is also lack of political will in GIS implementation by both government and key industry players. So it's also related to the poor perception. So that political will is, even when there is perception, even when they say, okay, we know, but what about the implementation? So you could go to organizations that have acquired infrastructure, but then they are just lying fallow because there is no will to train anybody to take up these things and use. Okay, and then there is, of course, the inadequate GIS infrastructure itself. So even when there is political will, you know, if the infrastructure is not there, then it's a problem. Then the benefits and prospects for GIS, particularly in flood research or hydrological research, is that it actually provides new and flexible forms of output, such as customized maps that are tailored to meet user-specific needs in digital or analog forms, proposed addresses, lists, and the rest of that. Because that is one critical benefit of GIS, especially in flow research. Then quick and easy access to large volume of data, because no matter what is the volume of data that is there, you can quickly put these things together in a GIS and analyze. Then the ability to select terrain data from the database by area or theme, the ability to merge one data set with another. And I think recent data interoperability has helped. In the past, different software were not talking to each other. You know, you have data, and then we have to go round and round because they don't support this format. But there are still certain software today that you really have to work hard to convert data from one format to the other to use with other software. But that issue still exists. Then the means to analyze special characteristics of data and then to search for particular characteristics of features in an area. So I may not be interested in the whole thing. If I'm dealing with flow research, having conducted the whole work, I can still narrow down to look at a very particular or small area or small feature or small issue and work with it. Then, of course, we can update our data quickly. Of course, this is general anyway to GIS analysis. And then, above all, I think the last three issues here are the ones that are very important. GIS has enhanced and sped up our processes. Whatever we do in the past, as a geographer, I know when we had to use stencil, to draw out. And then we also had to, after doing all that, you will go and do your maps manually, do the coloring manually and all those things. So today GIS has actually sped up our processes. It has enhanced the work and it has, of course, increased productivity. And when we talk about increased productivity, those of us that are working and in segments like this, it means that it has not only increased productivity, it also has increased revenue, okay, which I didn't mention here. So maybe perhaps I will have written that, and then it has provided a robust platform for showcasing the work. Because we do our work today and it's just there. Before we just put this thing, it's lying on the shelf. But today, whatever we do in flood modeling, we can showcase this work to the whole world using the internet. I want to thank you all for listening. Thank you very much for this opportunity once again. I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nyomo. Thank you very much for the presentation. That was quite insightful. I'm sure if we had more time, you would have gone into much detail and given us more games. We really appreciate that. There are a number of questions that came up, and I'm sure during the question and answer session, we will address all of that, or we'll read it all out, and then I'm sure you'll be able to respond to them all.
Thank you very much.